We're joined by Bill Eburn. He is the Whiskey Dick. You can find his YouTube channel, The Whiskey Dictionary. It's on YouTube. Just look for The Whiskey Dictionary. Now, we were talking.
Oh, nice.
Oh, that was now in what we should do there is what they call a jump cut. I didn't know what that was actually called until the previous segment of this podcast where Bill dropped that term. And that would be the perfect opportunity to do it because seconds ago, he's wearing a Whiskey Dick shirt. And then I look over and now he's wearing a Dungeons and Drams shirt, which is your other YouTube channel, Bill.
Well, it's funny. It's something that I've just done forever on live streams. Like I'll hop off the channel and I'll change. I have like 17 different shirts over there. And I will frequently change them. So it seemed appropriate, but if not ill-timed.
I was totally expecting you, as you were jumping up and making that switch, to just take out the Ardbeg and to Port Charlotte. And we would just hear a calamity of just bottles breaking and what
Wouldn't
have
be the
you.
first time.
Because that's what I would do, being the clumsy oaf that I am.
Yes. That's what happens when you roll a natural one. Aha, segue.
There you go. So Dungeons and Drams is your other podcast. There is an element of whiskey involved with that show. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So Dungeons and Drams. So it's a D&D podcast. So sorry, it's a video mostly, but we also produce a podcast. So you can find it on YouTube, Dungeons and Drams. We're on Twitch as well. But the idea was, I figured that people that would nerd out about whiskey would probably also nerd out about D&D. And I wasn't wrong. And we do have quite a few people who like to watch and interact with the stream. But we've decided that, of course, because it has to do with whiskey, we needed to incorporate that somehow. Now, D&D has a mechanic, and I'll keep this brief because mechanics, right? So D&D has a mechanic called inspiration, which means if you roll the dice and you don't like what it said, if you happen to have inspiration, which is something that your DM can just grant you for doing something cool or role playing really well, you can re-roll that dice. And this is like usually once a game kind of thing. But we decided to make this a mechanic of our homebrew game, and we call it Risky Whiskey. So once per game or session, each person that's playing with me has a single risky whiskey. If they roll and they don't like it, they can knock their drink back, whatever's left in their glass. And time is really the mistress here. If you just poured and you need your risky whiskey, that whole thing's going back. If you've got just a little tiny bit left, then you got lucky. And then you can re-roll your dice. So it's made for some really fun things, because sometimes people will just pour something really heavy cast strength and they'll like, would I rather just fail the roll, or do I want to kick this, 60% ABV whiskey back? Usually they kick it back.
So I have tried playing D&D. The setup time is what turned me off from it. But everything you just said, that would entice me to get back into it.
Nice. Well, good. I'm glad I did a good job selling it. Now, tell me what you mean by the setup time.
I just feel like when we were starting a game of it, and I don't know if the people that I was playing with ever actually started, but like just the character creation and just like there were people like myself who had zero familiarity with Dungeons and Dragons. So it was one of those things where I had no idea what it was going into it, and quickly learned it wasn't like just your run of the mill board game. And kind of, I was like, I'm out. I don't know if I can do it. And even still, just the level of commitment and dedication that people have to the game, I respect it. I think it's awesome. I don't know, like, it's the same reason why I'm not in a band, because I got the podcast.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, how many extracurricular activities can I do? And I know some people that just like their lives revolve entirely around their D&D campaign. And it's been going on for, and they have campaigns. They'll be in a campaign that's going on for a long time. I mean, just some quick backstory for you, Bill, is I worked at a video game company, and they actually developed a Dungeons and Dragons MMO. And so just the level of dedication that I've seen people have with not just D&D, but then even outside of work, then they be not just playing D&D, but games similar to D&D. And I'm just like, look, that's cool. I'd rather sit and watch your channel. That's why I'm saying I'd rather sit and watch your channel and take a drink with everyone else getting drunk during these inspiration rolls.
That's definitely part of the appeal too. There's definitely there's like three different layers here when you put on a D&D stream. So you have a guy like me who I've been, streaming forever with the Whiskey Dictionary. So I know all the software and I know it very well. But then you've got this other piece of software that we use called Foundry. And that is a virtual tabletop. Foundry it's a love-hate relationship. The piece of software is fantastic, but when I'm in there, it's work. You are creating maps, you're creating tokens to represent the different characters. It can be as involved as you want. Or, I certainly don't want to turn anybody off of D&D because it's actually one of those things where I think when people play it, they don't realize how much they're going to like it. And if they can get over themselves, or maybe not even, like if you just consider the fact that role playing and like people at the table aren't judging you, or even if they are, maybe it's just funny. It's a really fun time. Way more than you'd think, especially I mentioned earlier, I'm 40 now and I didn't start playing D&D till I think I was like 38. But I've been a gamer my whole life. Like D&D is not unfamiliar to me, but I had never played until I DM'd for a friend group of mine. I had this idea that I wanted to do Dungeons and Drams, and I was like, I don't know how to play D&D. I'd rather not learn on stream. Can I host a one shot for you guys? Which is generally like a 1, maybe 2 session thing. And they were all like, yeah, sure, let's do that. And it was like it was actually right around the time the pandemic started. We had a group of friends that we would all hang out on Thursday nights. We called it Thursday Night Club. And we would usually go to a bar and we would drink. And so after the pandemic started, we were like, well, let's keep this going to some degree. And let's all just have like a Zoom call and we'll hang on and we'll chat and do whatever. And we did that for probably like 6-7 months. And then I introduced this idea. I was like, hey, I want to try this D&D thing. And they all were really into it. So we played this one shot, which actually ended up being about 9 months. So they enjoyed it so much that I just kind of kept going with it. It started off little kid gets captured from a town by a bunch of goblins. Let's go hunt him down and kill him, to this big, huge thing with, one of the characters. He turned into a hippopotamus as a way to fight as a monk. He had an astral hippopotamus that just helped him out. It was just like, it could be as ridiculous or as kind of almost like fantasy down to earth, as if that means anything, as you want. And a good DM will roll with virtually anything. And there's a thing called the rule of cool. Like if you tell me you want to do something as your character, if there is a way to do that, I'm going to try to make it happen. The roll might be hard, but let's say, you're like, oh, I want to run up the wall 30 feet and jump down and stab that dude in the head. Be like, all right, roll for it. I just rolled a 7, so it would not have happened. But, if you rolled a 20, I'm going to find a way to make that happen.
I just thought of a good one.
Go ahead, Zach.
I was like, I think it'd be really funny if like you were a mage character and it's like, all right, I got a lot of inspiration points. My character sneezes. I want to accidentally crack, the barrier between space and time with my sneeze.
See, like if you told me that, if I could find a way to make that happen, I'd probably say like roll a D100, which is a dice that's literally 100 numbers. If you roll like a 98 to 100, sure, why not? You magically sneeze the heck out of those planes, and there's a rip in space time, and you can travel to the 9 hells if you want. There's all kinds of stuff that you could do, and it's cool because it's limited by imagination, but it's also so well established that they have thought of rules to cover almost everything, and I would say almost every rule is intuitive, which is wild to think about.
I was just thinking. Oh yeah, no, you go, Jack.
Let me just say that you, Bill, that you're the dungeon master for the games on these channels, and it's going back. You mentioned Foundry, and 2 things. First, rest in peace, Steve C. from Opie and Anthony.
Oh, when?
Oh God! We're going back to like
like a long time ago.
A long time ago. But remember, Foundry was his band.
Foundry, his band, right?
They used to make fun of all the time.
Pendulum is swinging the other way. Yeah.
Yes,
okay. That's right. Okay, you took me for because we were talking offline a little bit about Opie and Anthony too, just for the viewers. But I forgot that he had died like forever ago.
Yeah, and then Foundry Music was their absolutely terrible website that was impossible to navigate, but unfortunately, and it had the giant watermark up there on everything. But like, I have like I have like a Pavlovian response anytime I hear Foundry, and even just like someone's like, "Oh, I work at a Foundry," and just in the back of my head, I just hear the pendulum is swinging the other way. But when you said Foundry, Zach, you cringed a little bit.
Well, I mean, I cringed because I know Bill is a software engineer. So the fact that there's like a program that he can use that is also in his same like nerdy wheelhouse that is already going to trigger that same part of his brain is like, oh yeah, so you know a little bit, you know way too much information. So like, an hour could go by and then you're like, eons into like this program's like background, figuring out how to use it to make coffee.
I will say you're right. I think the only software I've ever had problems using were Adobe products, and I've made it a point to learn them.
No,
yeah,
don't take me back there, Bill. Don't take me back there, Bill. Please don't take me.
Yeah, you use like the worst Adobe product. I'm talking about like Premiere and Audition and stuff.
Oh, please, Bill. I love watching Zach have Vietnam flashbacks. Please continue.
No, that's becoming like the theme for the show now. Like me and my vivid like anime level flashbacks.
The amount of times that I would walk by Zach's desk and just see it wasn't head in hands, it was thumbs in eyeballs.
Oh no, yeah, that was when I was really stressed about everything.
Yeah, Zach and I had a lot of closed door conversations trying to make sure he was going to make it another day.
Oh Jesus!
No, it was bad. I was unmedicated. That's like I had like my official ADHD diagnosis the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like in therapy, so like I feel like I can actually enjoy life a little bit again, which is nice.
What a novel concept. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
It is nice being able to do that and not like beating my head into the keyboard every single day, but
drugs and alcohol, a winning combination.
You're right. Yeah.
I mean, yes, various forms and various levels.
Now, I am an absolute noob when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I know only what I needed to know back when I was supporting a D&D based video game. So, what is a dram?
Sure. All right. So a dram is a whiskey term. Basically, actually, what I have in my glass right now is about a dram. So a dram, for anybody who's thinking about this or listening to it, if you take a finger up against the side of a glass, that's about a dram. It's roughly equivalent to an ounce of whiskey. It just happens to be alliteration.
Okay. Did I tell you I'm a noob?
It works.
No, that's okay. It's a great question. Actually, something we probably it's a great place to start.
Okay.
Now, do you know what a dungeon is? Because there's multiple kinds, and I'd like to talk about any of them.
Is it like the one I have in my basement?
It depends. Is it similar to 50 Shades of Grey?
Okay, I wish I was joking about this because I call it the murder hallway. The jabroni that built my house. You know what what the hell is it called? A bulkhead. It's a door So the guy ran out of money when he was building my house. So I have the space for a set of stairs and where the bulkhead should be. And because he had no money, he just put outside, he just put some roof shingles over it. And then inside, if you go into my basement, you just see this ominous looking hallway to nowhere. So I call it the murder hallway. Basically, if I want to do like my best Joseph Fritzl impersonation, I've already got I've got part of it set up already. Like someone already did the work for me. Not that that's ever going to happen, but to answer your question, I do know what a dungeon is.
Well, then we'll just leave that one hanging out there. So obviously, actually, I shouldn't even say obviously, because Dungeons and Dragons as a concept is it is the quintessential thing that people think about when you think about a nerd. And I think that the popularity of D&D recently has taken it from something that only really, really big nerds play to something that literally anybody can play. Some of the people that I've played with privately, actually, and on Dungeons and Drams, are not people I would classically consider nerds. Actually, in fact, I'm about the only one I would. So it makes sense that I'm the dungeon master in this case. Anybody can play. And the rules themselves are extremely easy to learn, but they can go deep too. So let's say that we have a situation here. We've got the three of us here. I'm the DM and you two are the players. And I would say something to the effect of, you guys are walking down a trail through the woods and you hear a sound off to your left. Sounds like somebody's screaming. And, you might be like, okay, well, I want to know what that is. Maybe you're feeling heroic. Maybe you want to deal with the situation, or maybe you're not feeling heroic and you're just like, well, screw that. I'm going to keep walking. I might say like, well, roll a perception check. And this basically means, what do you hear? Like, do you just hear screaming, or do you maybe hear like the goblin that's in the bushes right next to you because they just kidnapped somebody and they're keeping an eye out while they kidnap them. And if you roll low, you're not going to hear the goblin as they sneak up behind you and maybe like, shoot an arrow in your back. It's all imaginary. And I just came up with that whole thing off the top of my head. It's not super impressive, but it's also like it's very easy to think about. And if you describe things well, you'll find that the mechanics of D&D allow you to describe scenes and interact with scenes very naturally. So I guess I probably more save this for the end, but I would just suggest anybody who's at all interested, watch a D&D live stream, whether it's mine on Dungeons and Drams, which I think you'd enjoy, but there's many of them out there. Some of the most popular ones are Critical Role. That's like an insanely huge popular stream, and they're very good at what they do. They're all voice actors. They are, at this point, they've become real actors, but they also have done a lot for just general movements like the LGBT community, as well as like mental health. They are generally good people, or at least they seem it. And it's an interesting thing that's been happening to media, and has had a big impact on it.
Could you see yourself like spinning up another YouTube channel where you do something that's similar to D&D, but not necessarily that, like another game in that vein, but also something you could incorporate whiskey into?
That's an interesting question. I haven't thought of that. At the moment, I like D&D, not only because it's popular, but also because, as I mentioned, it's very easy to play. And when you're drinking on a stream and trying to do everything that you have to do to keep a stream going, as well as running the game, you want it to be natural, and you want it to be easy to click buttons and think through, because those cognitive abilities start to go away. Because I'm usually drinking along with pretty much anybody who's doing that risky whiskey. I don't like to let people drink alone.
Okay. All right.
In fact, my players will often tell me, if they find out that I'm drinking something a little bit more cast strength, they'll be like, oh, good, tonight's going to be one of those nights we get away with some stuff. Or if I'm like, hey guys, I'm starting the night off on some water, they're like, boo.
Nice. Zach Ward, go ahead.
So I do know a good deal about D&D and the different worlds. So like, is there something that's unique about your homebrew worlds? Like, is like a specific goal? Like, are you guys looking for like the golden dram, or like, the dram to rule all drams, or something ridiculous like that?
No, that's a good question. Actually, it's funny. I haven't thought of the golden dram. However, there was a episode early on. It was episode 13, and I remember that specifically because it was I believe the episode's name was Snortimer's birthday, and there was a pig whose name was Snortimer, and there was a beer within the game that I came up with called Snortimer's Stout. And, little silly things like that, they come to me when I'm like out on a walk or a run, or, not that I run a whole lot, but still, driving. Like, all these little things come up in your mind, and working them into the game is pretty fun. But the general concept of the game that I am running, because as you mentioned, it's a homebrew world. which for the uninitiated, basically what that means is D&D does have settings that they have as part of the game. So you don't have to make everything up yourself if you don't want to. For me, that's the fun of the game. So not everybody feels that way. Some people like to get really crunchy with the numbers. I like to be, this is a creative outlet for me. So I came up with a world. I called it Dimidium, which in Latin means split world. And the idea, the history of this world is that it used to be almost like Pangea, but then this giant snake god came, and it was so massive that its body just like kind of going across the continents actually split the continents apart. And at some point, the gods, or at some point, this creature, I don't want to say too much, was defeated and disappeared from the world. And part of what's happening with the characters now has to do with that creature and an attempt to bring the creature's name is Halix back to the world. And our adventurers are basically encountering different situations where they're either trying to stop that from happening, or just learning more about the history of the world. And all of this stuff is stuff that I've made up. There was this one moment, maybe like 6-7 months ago, where I was explaining to my dad actually about this game, and he just stopped for me. He's like you just thought of all that? And I was like, yeah, I mean, over time and taking notes and whatever, but it was kind of like it almost brought it back grounded. Like everything that has happened in this game has just come from my brain, because none of it is from D&D as far as the settings. The monsters and stuff are things that you would know, but even them I usually change around a bit.
Nice. So what's like what's the power scaling in your world? Like, what does that look like? Do you know what that term means?
I do, but elaborate.
I mean, so is this more of like a magic based world? Is this what kind of like fantasy setting are we talking here? So
I would call it high fantasy. So there is quite a bit of magic. Like people who can do magic are not unknown within the world. However, it's not extremely common. There's still like sorcerers and wizards and warlocks who can do magic, bards.
More like sects and cults that kind of do that, but not really like, big groups and organizations that are like, this is the magician's organization kind of.
Got it. So there's this one floating island called Volantis. And Volantis is actually, if you guys, I know you, I think last week your episode on World of Warcraft and some of the things that they had added into the game there. I played a crap ton of World of Warcraft when I was younger. I played it for, I played it through Cataclysm, and I was in the open beta through Cataclysm. And so I knew quite a bit of it. But if you think about, I forget the name of the city, which is embarrassing because I just said how much I played this, but the
Alliance or Horde.
Well, it's the city that it was. You ended up in Shatrith. No, not Shatrith.
Oh, right. Yes. So
the one that was floating, the floating city. It began with a D.
Yeah, I can't. I'm blanking on it too. I don't know why.
Yeah. So the whole deal was like the mages in that world. They surrounded the city in a bubble, and then it ended up floating up into the sky and going somewhere different. Same kind of thing happened here, except it's called Volantis because it was a magical city, kind of at the base of a volcano, which was not. We didn't know it was a volcano until an ancient red dragon suddenly appeared and blew the top off the thing, and now it's just this lava hellscape. And the mages in the city, which had a different name at the time, which I won't go into, they raised it from the ground, and it's floating now off the coast of this continent called Akari. And so Volantis is kind of a city of mages. And wizards and whatnot and magic. So that is where the group is actually heading towards now. Their current goal is to get their hands on an airship so that they can get over to there.
Gotcha. Okay.
Sorry, don't feel bad about forgetting the name of the city. I have been playing Skyrim since the day it came out on multiple platforms, and I can barely remember Whiterun.
Oh man, I could talk Skyrim all day too.
Easily. Yeah, that's not something that we're gonna have an opposite day with this podcast if we go in that direction.
Yeah. I've played way too many stealth archers by mistake, so it's
It always ends up being a stealth archer something.
It's always
at
a stealth
the end
archer.
of the day. It's always a stealth archer. Actually,
I'm gonna be a mage. I'm not gonna let myself have any armor whatsoever. Oh, stealth archer.
But I was actually hearing recently that orcs end up being the most powerful stealth archer class because it's the way that their power, or like the way that the damage calculates when they do their stealth damage is just like because of the racial passives, it's way more powerful than it would be with any other race. So it's like, interesting. Yeah. It's great that like we're still finding things to do in that game. And on that note, I think it's interesting too the way that you kind of have things set up. So I was wondering, like, this is just a crazy idea, but like theoretically, you could have people thrown in as like a so we're gonna have like a this is the setting for this episode, but we have some special guests that are here with us, and I'm gonna give them a character that they're gonna be, but they're gonna be like the voice, and they have some leeway, but like I'm basically gonna use them to fuck with you guys.
So actually, it's funny that you say that. So one of our permanent players now. So when we started the stream, we had 4 players. 3 of them were other whiskey channels, and that's part of where the Dungeons and Drams comes from. These are other prevalent whiskey related channels, which we call ourselves a whiskey tube. So 3 of the channels are whiskey tube channels, and then one of them was my friend, like in personal life, named Molly, and she has type 1 diabetes, and she runs a blog called huggingthecactus.com. And so if you're interested, check that out. So she played with us for about a year, and then she kind of got a new job and everything. And she was like, I got to kind of peel off. And so we spent about a month actually kind of working her character out of the way. But during the time prior to her leaving, I had introduced another character who was another whiskey channel, thinking it would only be for maybe like 4 or 5 sessions. And she's still playing with us. And, it's been probably 5 months at this point. And I imagine that she's going to be a permanent fixture on the channel, but it does lend itself to having special guests, which is great. And that was totally a thing I had planned on. I only ever wanted to have 4 players so that I would always have that 5th slot as I could have a special guest. And you could play D&D with 10 people if you want to, although the combat will get very slow. I think an ideal scenario is 3 to 5 players. So. Nice, but yeah, I've got some ideas. I have this one little town I call Hobblehaven, and it's a town mostly of gnomes. And the idea is that it's very kind of cliche if you want to think about it. It's very standard. They're all, a lot of them are engineers, whatever. But they have this one situation where there's mechanical bulls, and they all compete to make kind of the best one that will knock the riders off. And part of the one of the events there is the mechanical bull riding competition. So little things like that. And we've never actually even played there, but I always had this idea that if I have, a couple of special guests who really want to play, I'll bring a couple of regular players and a couple of special guests, and we'll just do a thing in Hobblehaven. But it's been really fun. I've done a couple of like world building episodes where I've talked about random locations in the world that I wanted to better define. And, I'll crowdsource it a little bit from people who watch the live streams. I'll be like, there was this one area I called, I think I called it like the singing coral. And the idea was it's an atoll, like in real life, there's the blue atoll, which I've been a scuba diver most of my life. And I went diving on this thing forever ago. And it's this giant deep hole in the world. And it's surrounded by islands. But in the D&D game, I'm like, I kind of want to represent that. So let's do a thing where this similar idea, and there's coral in the middle. And as during certain points of the month, the water actually recedes, and there's all this coral that's exposed to the air, and the wind blowing through it actually plays like a melody. And I'm like, this is silly, but it's very magical sounding, and let's kind of expand upon that. So anyway, this is an example of just how a nothing idea like, I want to have like a deep pit in the world can turn into something that sounds a little magical. So yeah.
Nice. Going back to what we were talking about with our Skyrim playthroughs, how we always end up as a stealth archer. Have you found with D&D it's easy to go that route or that it's challenging to try to roll a character that is different from one you're already accustomed to?
That's a good question. People definitely go certain paths. You know, you've got a lot of people who play D&D for the first time. This always surprised me. A lot of people will play a fighter, and they'll often play a human fighter. I'm like, why are you playing a fantasy role-playing game if you just want to be a human with a sword? You know,
right?
Like,
Yeah.
Like in my mind, I mean, actually, I guess I only have like half a leg to stand on, because in my mind, I'm like, my ideal character is probably like a human wizard, but I'm still a human. I don't necessarily want to be an elf because meh, but maybe a dwarf because I like to drink. But so, but
Yeah.
good.
Oh no, I
Yeah.
was
Well,
thinking,
anyway,
like,
so like I would personally prefer to play a magic user, but you've got your typical class roles. I guess you got your tank, and you've got your healers are a little bit less so. There are clerics, but most clerics are some form of fighter. They just have the ability to heal. So you've got your tank, you've got your DPS, you've got your healer, and then you've got like your ranged. And there's roles to fit all of those things. The one thing I've found really interesting about D&D and learning more and more about it is just how impactful it has been on every aspect of fantasy, from video games to books to everything. Like, it's only been around about 40 years, which actually at this point it's closer to 50, but still, like, that's a long time, but it's not forever. And most things can be thought about as like a D&D session. Even nowadays when I watch a show, I'm just like, boy, this would make a really good session, like a really good, short adventure or something like that. And you can kind of translate anything into D&D rules.
What's, I guess, the biggest challenge with having a channel like Dungeons and Drams?
Finding an audience. I've been able to bring over quite a bit of an audience from the whiskey channel, but growing organically on YouTube nowadays is actually quite a bit harder than it was back when I started the Whiskey Dictionary. Not only are there just a lot more people, but things that used to be almost inaccessible unless you were really willing to put in the work are things that you could just do on your phone now. And starting up a channel that is a live stream about your D&D game, you've got to have a secondary reason for people to care. And to me, that was, well, come watch us drink while we try to play this game, because it's funnier that way, because half of us are drunk, and that's kind of entertaining to watch. So, but let me ask you guys a question, because I feel like this is getting too interviewy, and I want to make it more of a conversation. So, Zach, it sounds like you've played a little D&D in your life.
Oh yeah, so I've definitely dabbled a couple times. The campaign that I was actually going to be the most invested in, but I ended up, having like this is around the time where I was like jumping around different apartments in Worcester. But it was this really cool concept of this world that was like kind of like a anime, like martial arts, like stylized kind of world, or like, there are going to be like superpowers. Like I always like the idea of when I played like Skyrim, I would always try to do like a battle mage, because like I like the idea of being able to do some magic and being able to do some fighting as well, kind of like like a red mage, if you're thinking of like the classic like Final Fantasy character tropes. So like I like that concept, and like I've always also loved the whole alignment system with D&D. Like, I always, when I think of myself, even though I'm very good-natured, I always like to think of like I'm more of like a chaotic neutral kind of individual. It's like, I just find I find chaos in some situations to be funny and hilarious. And I like the whole concept of just like, this character does what they want to do, and as long as this set of criteria is met, things are good. But the moment any of those things are gone, that character might be just doing their own thing. It's like, I think that is also kind of funny. So yeah, I'm a little familiar with it. I just haven't really joined any sessions regularly because for me the big I guess intimidation factor isn't so much the getting started, it's the time it takes to keep it going.
Yeah. And that's fair. I mean, it is a thing that you have to commit to. Like with the Dungeons and Drams things, like we play every Monday, and we live stream every Monday. But then, I mean, I'm editing video, I'm making shorts out of it, I'm doing other stuff. Plus, I do other stuff on the channel too. Like I have some music playlists, and I've got I talk about magic items and stuff because I wanted to bring more people into it organically. But to your point, even as a player, it's still a commitment. As a DM, they're spending like 5 to 10 hours on each one of those sessions, you know, and it really depends on whether you're designing, you know, the next part of a dungeon or designing a whole city. That's my current thing right now. The players are in a city called Urngor Zuak, which translates from Dwarven to Shadow of the Mountain. And there's a lot of different points of interest, and they could choose to go to any one of those. So as far as being a DM, this is actually one of the more challenging things that you can do, is running a city where there are things that they could just want to go do. And or they could just like this is great and a fun little experiment. So the episode we just filmed yesterday, it was kind of in parallel with a separate interlude episode I filmed with one of the players who couldn't make the game yesterday. And he said that he wanted to go to a brothel. And I was like, okay, well, let's make this more interesting than you just going to a brothel. So as it stands, he ended up going in, and he did what you would expect in a brothel, but there were people to talk to as well, and there were things to learn. And he learned that one of the heads, so they're in a dwarven city, there's 4 different clans in the city, and he learned that one of the heads of the clan had been cheating on his wife with one of the people in the brothel. And I'm like, perfect. That's about as simple as it can get as far as a quest hook. And he plays a warlock, so his patron takes particular satisfaction in seeing people ruined. So he's like, okay, you now know this information. Make me proud, you know? So, and that's all you have to give a player too. You just say like, this is something that you now should act on. If you don't, it's not like the end of the world, but you now have free reign to like ruin this guy. How are you going to do it? And that's kind of where you leave it. And then it's so exciting to watch what players do with that, because some people's brains work very different than mine.
Oh yeah, because like I was immediately thinking that like, oh yeah, okay, so with that information, I'm gonna find a way to extort myself as one of the people that is directly underneath him, so I can insert myself into the politics, so that I can find some way of getting a free access flow of money before we leave the city.
Interesting. All right, so you extort the guy. Okay.
Oh yeah, more than likely, because I would probably be playing a character that's like, I just need to keep funds going because I want to make sure that I always have at least money for me to get out, and hope you guys have what you need to get out when you need to get out, because like I'm kind of always looking for that. I would love playing like a warlock type character, like a rogue mage kind of character would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I could see that. Maybe an arcane trickster might be your thing.
Yes.
It's like a rogue with magic.
It's like, yes, because I like the deception angle. I like the just getting into places I shouldn't be by myself, just to like get information for the team, or just like also maybe just for me. Also, I like I've also played a lot of games, like board games that this is the other thing that like for the audience, because there's a lot of board games out there now that are like stylized after D&D that kind of give you that experience. Like there's actually a lot of them that are like will go like really in depth and be hours long. Like I can't remember any of them right now, but like
okay.
There's a couple that are like dungeon crawlers, or they'll give you a character, and then like you'll go and like explore different areas in the dungeon, and then whoever's running the game, like there'll be like counters, so like actions that you take you don't realize are ticking a counter for something in one direction, and when enough of it happens, they can roll a die, the DM, and then something happens based on all that stuff. So I like all of the mechanics of that. And especially when you play games like the games where there's like a lot of like you can kind of improv, bargain back and forth with people, do different
so like
things,
role playing between players.
Yeah, exactly. Like that kind of stuff also makes it a lot more immersive and interesting.
And if you have a good dungeon master, like they can facilitate a lot of that, and it's kind of why I like D&D specifically, because it's almost like the mother of all of those games. Even if there are no mechanics that work specifically, let's just say you're like, out of nowhere, you're like, oh, well, I have a skyship. I only need it to get over here. And then I want to hire the captain to like just fly trade routes for me and have that be a stream of income. Like there's no rules for that in the D&D manual, but as a DM, like that's fairly easy to figure out. It's like, okay, well, every, 7 days, you're going to get 100 gold profit. Like it's as simple as that. I just came up and that it doesn't have to be more than that. But if the player really wants to be like, well, I want to look at this map and pick trade routes and decide, like, tell me what the major export of each one of you're kind of getting into a different game at that point, but there's no reason a DM can't spend 20 minutes and figure all of that out.
Mm-hmm.
So how about you, Jack? So obviously you played Skyrim, which I would say Skyrim is a lot of D&D-like, but it's more just an RPG, right? So when you said that you played quite a bit of Skyrim, what's your usual character?
So right now I'm playing a Nord because I realized when going through all of the different races in the game, I think the only one I haven't touched yet is Nord, because it goes back to what you were saying earlier, where like, why are you going to play D&D if you're just going to play as a human warrior,
Right.
Like that's still, you can do that in any game, but you got to dive into the lore of the game where Nords are, they are Skyrim, right? Like that's you're playing as a character that you're in their homeland. And I've always felt that, every character I've played, because the first character I rolled was, I believe it was a wood elf. And I've always gravitated towards characters that had a heavy emphasis on magicka. So, and even if they didn't, it would still be sort of a split between strength, being a warrior class, and then having some degree of magicka ability. And I really want to try to do a playthrough where I'm just straight up just warrior, where magicka is just going to be an afterthought. Like I love doing the College of Winterhold. Yeah, I love doing that quest line, but it's almost sort of cheating if you're playing as a character that has that heavy emphasis on magicka.
I totally agree. Yeah, so, it almost makes it like not hard at all.
Right. It's such an easy way to like cheat the game too, because then you can get your follow. And I prefer to play vanilla too. Like I've spent so much time modding the game, and then I've also been burned by mods becoming unavailable, so then my save file is useless. So I prefer to at least have that one, human follower or whatever that you have. But it is sort of cheating with magicka, because then you can summon, you can conjure something. You can conjure a familiar. You can conjure an elemental. And that is just, obviously it's going to give you added strength, but then you can also just kind of sit back and let the AI do its thing, and you just kind of jump in as needed. So, I just really sort of bounce around, but I'm trying a Nord right now. But I've definitely fallen back on creating, a character that ultimately became a stealth archer, despite my attempts. So that's
exactly how it turns out. It's always despite your best effort. Like you really you're like, well, I have to stealth to get in here, and my stealth is crap, so let me go train that up. And I guess I may as well shoot him with my bow. It's just, I'm totally with you. Yeah. I actually have vivid memories of, I think my second to last playthrough, of having a giant just beat the crap out of me while I was casting heal on myself to train up my heavy armor stat and my shield. And just it's funny to think about what that looks like from the outside of, oh, Bill, are you playing a video game? What's happening? Oh, this giant has been beating on me for 30 minutes so my number can go up. And every now and then I block it so my other number goes up.
Well, now we were talking about, or Zach, you were talking about rather, alternatives to D&D, but then you were blanking on what they were. And then I was thinking too, I'm like, wow, I know there's at least a couple out there that are big. And
so Pathfinder is the big one.
And that one was, I'm kicking myself for not thinking of it. But then also Cyberpunk.
Yep.
Which is now I have put an insane amount of hours into 2077, and I fucking hate that game, but I can't put it down. But that now I'd be curious if Bill, if you would be into doing something similar to Dungeons and Drams, but with a cyberpunk campaign, like an OG cyberpunk campaign.
So probably not. And I'd rather yes and this, but in this case, it's more, that's not my like niche. I don't know enough about it. Whereas I've spent my whole life playing JRPGs and watching Lord of the Rings and reading fantasy. Like this stuff is all second nature to me. If you tell me to make up some random magic crap off the top of my head, I could probably do it. If you're like, oh, hey, tell me how this like steampunk thing works, I'd be like, Steam, you know, like maybe some mohawks. I don't really know. But I'm not against the idea of a different game. But I really like the idea of D&D. Again, because everything's just super intuitive, and it's just been around so long that they've figured out most of the things that you could possibly run into. However, a lot of times on the episodes, you know, they'll tell me that they want to do a thing, and I know that there's no rule for it, and I find it's extremely easy to just be like, well, roll me a d20 and then add this to it. You know, like maybe add your charisma modifier because you're trying to, you know, go to the brothel. Like in the DMG, there's no, you know, short of just saying like, hey, roll a performance check to see how you do. You know, if you roll a nat 20, maybe you're like Podrick from Game of Thrones and they don't take your money. But so there's not a whole lot that you can't just envision. I've also kind of put a kibosh on myself doing anything new YouTube. Because Whiskey Dictionary, Dungeons and Drams, and having a family is about 30 hours a day. So,
yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Now I do have that desire though. I'm just like, man, it'd be fun to do this or do this, or you know, I have this hobby. It'd be fun to catalog it. And just with having all the gear, it's a huge barrier to entry that I've already overcome.
Now, I am a huge fan of the Alien film franchise.
The food ain't that bad, baby.
And I totally forgot that there's a RPG in the vein of D&D that is out there. Now, earlier we were talking about D&D and just like I am interested in the general concept of it, and I am totally in support of people getting into it. Maybe not necessarily my thing, but also me not being opposed to watching others play. Case in point, watching your channel, Bill. But Alien, I could totally see myself getting into that. Oh my god, especially coming up with like a narrative, like a campaign, like coming up with like an actual like story. Oh my god, like because
that makes a lot of sense actually.
Because we don't have a lot of good Alien games out there. Like Alien Isolation was a masterpiece. It was just too long. But all the other Alien games that have come out have just been hot garbage. I know there's a RTS that's on the way that people have a lot of hopes for, but I'm holding my breath.
Shot if it's any good.
I'm holding my breath because that Fireteam Elite that came out last year just was like, I'd say that like great definition of a 7 out of 10. Like it was very, very in the vein of Left 4 Dead. But I played through a couple of missions, and then I'm like, I don't see myself wanting to ever replay this.
I played a ton of AVP 2, Alien vs Predator 2, back in the day. That was for me. That was prime college, and we were doing LAN parties like all night long. I'd constantly play as the alien. I like to play as the runner. Have you guys, either one of you, played AVP 2?
I haven't. No.
Oh, bummer. I really thought for a second that you would have. Long story short, you could play as alien, a predator, or a human. And each one, there's like maybe 3 or 4 different types of each one. And I was always the runner, which was incredibly fast, very squishy. But if you get really good at running on walls, like you can be a terror. Because you'll just be upside down and on the sides and whatever. And I did get really good at that. And it was really fun to just do that as a LAN party and kill somebody and hear like four computers down, the person be like, come on. or just son of a bitch. So
Yeah,
I missed that.
I remember there was an AVP game that came out probably about a decade ago because my ex-wife worked at GameStop, and I remember she was really excited for it to come out. And when it did come out, I guess there was a lot of disdain towards the multiplayer aspect of it because it was just, I can't remember. I can't remember if it was the Alien or the Predator, but one of them was just like super OP, and going up against it was just like there was no point in playing because if like someone was playing as whatever that class, I guess if you want to call it that, was, then it was a losing game.
Mm-hmm. Well, you brought up an interesting point a minute ago about the like kind of a D&D-esque alien game, because it makes sense. Like the xenomorphs are all over the place. Like they're going to be on any planet, so you could really just take that as a concept. Like you have a homebrewed alien race that you thought of entirely, and it's being overrun by xenomorphs. I mean, it's almost StarCraft-esque. You know, it's like you're getting overrun, you got to figure it out. And you could really make that into almost like a mystery concept where there is a xenomorph and you're a bunch of people in a facility and you got to figure out how to, you know, they mostly come at night, mostly that whole thing.
Yeah. Now, my thing.
17 days. Hey man, I don't want to rain on your parade. We're not going to last 17 hours.
Thanks. Thank you, Hudson. Now my thing, and I'm sure someone has already done this, but I would love to do it on my own, is now I had just recently read the William Gibson script for Alien 3, which was turned into a graphic novel series a few years ago, and then was turned into a novel a couple of years ago. And it's just like, I hate Alien 3 so much, and it's got such a storied development because it was so troubled, and reading one possible version of what the movie could have been, it like I'm just reading it and I'm like I was so enthralled by it, but also so angry because I'm like, why wasn't this the thing that was made? But that alone could be the perfect campaign setting for the Alien tabletop game.
Totally. Now, actually, funny thing, Alien 3 was actually the first movie I ever saw. Not movie, but the first Alien movie I ever saw.
Okay.
I don't know how, do you happen to know when Alien 3 came out off the top of your head?
1992.
Roughly? 92. So I was born in 83, so I would have been 9 years old.
Yep.
So I saw it probably around then, which is definitely way too early to see it. Having a 9-year-old at home, I couldn't imagine having her watch that movie.
But it's funny you say that because I was around 9 or 10 years old when I saw Alien the first time.
Okay. Yeah, but I remember seeing that and just being like, well, this is super cool, but I have no idea what's happening. And then I watched Alien 2, and then eventually I watched Alien 1. And I remember being like, boy, I bet Alien 1 would have been fantastic had I never seen Alien 2 or 3 yet. You know, like it's a very different kind of movie. Like the 2 and 3 are very action oriented, you know, and 1 is very like suspense.
Yep.
Yeah.
Alien, the first Alien is like the quintessential horror film, like sci-fi horror film, and Aliens is the quintessential 80s action flick. Not to mention, like you stamp James Cameron's name on that, and you're gonna have nothing short of perfection. And Alien 3, what we ultimately got is such. It's not just a slap to the face. It is a full-blown mushroom stamp on the cheek. It is such a fucking insult to anyone that liked Aliens because you kill off Newt at the beginning. You kill off Hicks. And the Gibson script, Ripley is in a coma for the entire thing. And Hicks is supposed to be the protagonist, the main character in that version. And fun fact about Alien 3, Michael Biehn, who played Hicks, was so pissed at the version of Alien 3 that got made. Because he knew, like, going into it, like, starting with the Gibson script, like, oh, cool, I'm going to be the main character in this one. And then what ultimately gets made, he is killed off almost immediately at the beginning. So he demanded his salary from Aliens. for a like super grainy gif of his like face on a computer screen at the beginning of Alien 3, because that's how mad he was. It's like, yeah, you can use my likeness, but I want millions upon millions of dollars for it. So,
man, you've kind of encouraged me. I might go back and rewatch those first 3 movies in order, because I don't know that I've actually ever done that.
Yeah,
and not like within a reasonable time frame, but the fact that in my mind I remember Alien 3 as being a good movie, I bet I would probably have the same opinion as you now if I were to rewatch them.
Yeah,
there's because it just yeah.
Well, no, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna say because if you think about like the Runner which was the quick one, I think that one came from a dog.
Yes,
which strikes me as something that like if I were to see it after seeing the first 2 movies, I'd be like, that's bullshit. Like,
yep.
Just like the dog is, it's a dog, so it's a fast one, I guess.
Yeah,
and
you're going back to also like the formula of the first film where by the way, spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen any of these movies.
Oh yeah,
I probably should have said
spoilers,
that.
Right? Yeah,
I should have said that 10 minutes ago.
Spoilers for the 30-year-old movies. Sorry, guys.
Yep.
I was curious.
Rosebud was his sled.
I was curious. Soylent Green is people? What? You mean he was dead the whole time?
Snape kills Dumbledore.
So
that's in the box.
That one I'd actually feel bad about, the Snape one. But
I've always been curious if my girlfriend has seen any of the Alien films, and I guess now she doesn't have to watch any of them with me. But Alien 3, if you go back to watch it, there's a version called the Assembly Cut. And now I shockingly haven't seen that, but I understand that it's sort of like it's like the Alien
Snyder
equivalent of, like the Snyder Cut, the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. It's a not a totally different version of Alien 3, but there are enough changes in it that make it more enjoyable. It doesn't like really smooth the burn at all of what happens at the beginning, but there are like significant enough changes throughout that like you're watching it, you're like, okay, maybe I don't hate this movie as much. Although I still think one of my favorite scenes in that movie is when Charles S. Dutton's character is like, he decides he's going to take the alien head on, and the thing picks him up, and just seconds before it's like Jaw comes out and kills him, he just goes, "Is that all you got, motherfucker?"
which totally reminds. So like a couple of weeks ago, I found myself rewatching Predator.
Sick.
I am a very big Arnold Schwarzenegger fan. Not in like a weird way. Like I don't know anything really about the guy, but I just love all of his movies and I'll watch them all anytime I see him on. And so I rewatched Predator, and not only does it have just the amazing scene between Arnold and I forget the guy's name. He played Lando. No, he didn't play Lando.
Oh,
he played he's the guy in Mandalorian now. He's like the High Chancellor guy.
Yeah. Oh God. Now I'm blanking on his name, but
I just looked up his name like less than a week ago and I forget his name. Either way,
he's
when they
Dylan.
do this just manly arm thing.
Yeah.
But then you've got him to your kind of your point where he's fighting the Predator with the one arm. Like he turns around to shoot him. He's only got the one arm and his arm falls off. Oh man, what a good movie.
I'm
right here. Come on, kill me.
Damn, that's actually a really good Arnold.
Thank you. I practiced.
That's better than the one that I have loaded in the soundboard here.
I'm looking for that camera, but friend of us, I'm supposed to be here.
And so, I know like the second we wrap up here, I'm gonna remember his name, but I know in Predator his name is Dylan. And
Dylan.
The only reason I remember that is because
they got you pushing too many pencils, Dylan.
Opie and Anthony's first episode, for their first day on XM satellite radio, they were bitching about how their instant replay, which is what they use to play sound drops, only had one sound drop loaded into it. It was just Arnold going, "Dylan." So all morning they just kept playing it over and over because they had nothing else to play.
I almost wonder if that's why I got into doing the voice. I remember this is totally off topic, but like a long time ago, well, let's see. So like I said, I'm 40 now. So I was early 20s, I started a like an outdoor club through meetup.com, and I called it Chaos. And it was camping, hiking, adventure, and outdoor sports. And we used to go camping constantly. And around the campfire, I would frequently be known to do my Arnold Schwarzenegger impression. And I used to practice it constantly. And it was just something that, for whatever reason, it became very important to me to be good at it. So it was nice that you complimented that. But the whole Dylan thing, I remember them playing that. And I'm almost wondering if that had something to do with me choosing to just suddenly impersonate Arnold Schwarzenegger. Because like any other man, you know, Arnold is in the repertoire, Butthead is in the repertoire. There's a few others that you might, you know, they kind of vary from guy to guy, but everybody's got Arnold and Butthead.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And poor Schwarzenegger too. All of his like more recent things that he's been doing ever since he got back into acting have all been pretty piss poor by comparison. Yeah. But I mean, he respect to the man for still trying. Yeah. So the Alien RPG, I'm looking at the website for it, and they mentioned this. Both you and Zach will like this. So they say, quote, in the Free League web shop, you can also find the Alien RPG core rulebook, starter set, Destroyer of Worlds in Heart of Darkness cinematic scenarios, the Colonial Marines Operations Manual campaign book, including virtual tabletop adaptations for the Foundry platform.
There you go. Yeah, not a huge surprise. Foundry's been getting huge lately. So nice. It's cool because it's a single time that you pay for it. Like Roll20 is another big one, but that's a monthly payment. Foundry is $50 and you have it.
Oh,
and, so it's like
it's a one and done.
Yeah, I was gonna say like WinZip, but or WinRAR. Nobody pays for those. No one pays for those.
Nobody pays for WinZip.
So one of my favorite Ask Me Anything threads on Reddit was, I paid for WinRAR. Ask me anything. They do mention Alien RPG. You can get it at Roll20, also Fantasy Grounds and Drive-Thru RPG.
That makes sense.
Zach, before we wrap up here, anything that you got on your end?
I just think it would be fun at some point to, like, I don't know, just do something, whether that's like, you know, us tasting whiskey, or like I was like sitting here thinking like, I wonder what I could cook with whiskey. And like now I'm like, I gotta ask Bill, like, you know, like how easily could I make like a syrup or a flavoring out of a whiskey so that I can, like, you know, bake things and make things with it. Also would be fun to do like a cameo, like, you know, grunt like character for the stream at some point, because I just think that just like, especially if it just adds chaos and makes things really fun for the people that are always there, that would be really cool to do.
Tell you what, Zach, I'll have you on. You could play a gnome, and within about 10 seconds of being on the stream, you're going to blow yourself up. And that'll be
Oh, wait.
Hi, everybody. I'm Zach.
I would pay. I know I don't have to pay any money for this, but I would pay money to watch that. All right.
I might chip into my own stream to just see that happen. So, to answer your question, Zach, though, actually, there's about 1 million people who do it better than I would as far as incorporating bourbons, specifically bourbon, into food. You could actually, even maybe a couple hours before we started recording here, I was looking at how to make, it was an upside down peach bourbon pie. It sounded awesome. I was just looking at, because I've done a couple episodes where I've cooked stuff, not many, but there is this one thing. And actually, if I think about it, I will send it to you. There's a bourbon maple chili that I started making years ago. I tweaked the recipe that I had found a recipe online. I tweaked it more. I actually did a few, I did a few side-by-sides where I tried different bourbons that I thought would make sense. And I picked what I thought was the best bourbon. And now I actually host a chili cook-off at my house every year, and I submitted that one last year. It didn't win, which I was a little sad about, but it was still very good. It was well liked.
Nice.
So.
All right. By the way, chili cook-off. Homer Simpson with the hottest pepper. Cover
your mouth in wax.
Yes.
Oh yes, that's my favorite episode.
The space coyote.
You can't quote Simpsons that I won't get. I promise.
Hey, wait a minute. Dogs can't talk.
Huge ass.
They say he carved it from an even bigger spoon.
Let him go, Ralph. He knows what he's doing. Oh my God. Okay, I could go on for minutes about The Simpsons, but I won't. Right. All right. Bill Eburn, the Whiskey Dick. You can find his whiskey channel, The Whiskey Dictionary, on YouTube. It's simply The Whiskey Dictionary, and also his Dungeons and Dragons whiskey themed channel. You can also find that on YouTube as well. Dungeons and Drams. Bill, thank you so much for joining us here on the old podcast. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on. This was actually as much fun as I was hoping, but way more fun than I was expecting, I suppose.
That's exactly what we look for.
Good to get to know you guys.
Hell yeah.
Get to know you, Jack. I already knew you, unfortunately, Zach, but it was nice to hang out with
Like he says, unfortunately.
you saw I slipped that in there.
Yeah, very happy to have you on, Bill, and very happy to have you not be on the screen anymore. I got used to not hearing these roasts.
Yeah, boo, Zach, you suck, boo.
So, Jack, I've been thinking maybe you and I should start a podcast together. We could call it All Skyrim and Aliens.
And welcome back to another great episode of Fuck Zach Ward, where we talk about Jack's adventures with his Nord in Skyrim. Zach, you suck.
ZachYouSuck.com.
Zach, I'm kidding.
Hashtag Zach, you suck.
Zach, I'm kidding. You know I love you. You set this interview up, so I appreciate you.
Yeah.
No, we definitely need to go up and we need to find ZachYouSuck.com and just take that domain so we can use it in the future. I mean, I'm not even kidding.
Zach, you suck.
Oh,
it's just one button and it plays that sound clip.
Let me get back to you on that. It might be a possibility.